They agreed to put pressure on Russia and finalized work on security guarantees for Ukraine. Will the coalition of the Willings meeting become a black mark for Putin? And how did Zelensky respond to the bunker dwellers' invitation to come to Moscow? All the details about this coming up soon. Europe must stop buying Russian oil and put pressure on China. During a phone conversation with EU leaders, Trump dragged both Orban and Fico through the mud. Swarms of drones. How did Ukraine manage to disable almost 20% of Russia's oil refinery capacity? And what other winged guests will soon visit Putin's defense industry? What nonsense is Patrushev spouting? Putin's loyal ally has accused Japan of preparing new territorial claims against Russia. All this and more in detail right now. In the meantime, subscribe to the Ukraine Today channel and give this episode a like. So, already 26 countries have expressed their readiness to send their soldiers to Ukraine or to support such a mission. French President Emmanuel Macron announced this following the meeting of the coalition of the willing. These 26 countries have agreed to send troops to Ukraine as a guarantee force or to be present on land, at sea, or in the air in order to support Ukrainian territory and Ukraine itself the day after a ceasefire or the establishment of peace, the French president noted. The goal is to prevent any new large-scale aggression and to ensure the clear involvement of these 26 states in Ukraine's long-term security, Macron said. The French leader added that further negotiations would first involve bilateral meetings between the US and Russia, followed by trilateral and quadrilateral talks. If Russia continues to refuse dialogue, sanctions will be strengthened. For his part, President Zelensky stated that the key task now is to strengthen the Ukrainian army and ensure security guarantees. He emphasized that strength for Ukraine is strength for peace. That is why efforts are now actively underway to enhance the country's defense capabilities and resilience. Members of the coalition of the willing are also ready to supply Ukraine with long-range missiles, according to the British government. But how much time will pass from being ready to supply to the missiles actually reaching Russia? And will Trump approve the idea after Zelensky's phone conversation with European leaders? All the details are coming up in our international review.
A meeting between Putin and Zelensky in Moscow. Well, only in the dreams of the Kremlin dictator. And even while in China, Putin doesn't forget about Ukraine. How sweet! And there he goes again, spouting another batch of nonsense.
By the way, Donald asked me if possible to arrange such a meeting. I said yes, it's possible. Well, in the end, if Zelensky is willing, let him come to Moscow. Such a meeting will take place.
Interesting, so without coming to Moscow, there can't even be a hint of a meeting, right?
Overall, I have never ruled out the possibility of such a meeting.
Nevertheless, the head of Ukraine's foreign ministry has already responded to Putin's invitation to the Kremlin.
Currently, at least 7 countries are ready to host a meeting between the leaders of Ukraine and Russia to put an end to the war. These are Austria, the Vatican, Switzerland, Turkey, and 3 Gulf states. These are serious proposals, and President Zelensky is ready for such a meeting at any moment. However, Putin continues to mislead everyone by making deliberately unacceptable proposals. Only increased pressure can finally force Russia to take the peace process seriously.
Of course, what kind of constructive conversation can we talk about if Putin says he is waiting for an acceptable option to end the conflict, otherwise he will not stop?
It seems to me there is a certain light at the end of the tunnel. Let's see how the situation develops. If not, then we will have to resolve all the tasks before us by military means.
And of course, we can't go without Putin's usual statements. Russia has always been against Ukraine joining Nato. The Kremlin also insists that it is not fighting for territory, but for the rights of people in these territories. And of course, Ukraine needs elections. Or no, a referendum.
So what do the current authorities need to do if they want to be legitimate and take full part in the settlement process? They need to hold elections. Actually, not elections, sorry, first and foremost. They need to hold a referendum in accordance with the Constitution of Ukraine. Any questions regarding territories, any at all, can only be resolved through a referendum.
Putin is hoping for immortality. Isn't that a bit much? During a conversation in China, Xi told Putin about the chances of extending life to 150 years, something the Kremlin dictator so devoutly believes in.
Well, yes, modern health treatments, medical means, and even, all sorts of surgical procedures related to organ replacement, they allow humanity to hope that active life will continue differently than it does today. The average age varies from country to country, but nevertheless the length of life will increase significantly.
Meanwhile, the head of Chechnya has been charged in absentia with a crime by the Security Service of Ukraine. In one of his speeches, Kadyrov ordered that Ukrainian prisoners be used as human shields. But then the Chechen troublemaker responded with a poem in which he is both surprised by the accusations and yet does not deny them.
So here I am, sitting, eating cookies, reading the news, and suddenly I wasn't in the mood for entertainment anymore. Everything around me started to feel uneasy. Some unremarkable agency from a country that starts with the letter U insists that a mutt named the SBU is offended by me.
Well, at least Kadyrov is still able to write poetry. But is he still able to govern the republic? That's the question. His health is clearly failing. In August, for example, he nearly drowned in Turkey. Meanwhile, his son Adam is appearing more and more often on his Telegram channel and is already making certain statements.
The Ukrainian president has already responded to the ploy of the bald KGB man from Moscow. During a press conference following the meeting of the Coalition of the Willing in Paris, Volodymyr Zelensky responded to the invitation from the Russian dictator Putin to hold a bilateral meeting between him and Zelensky specifically in Moscow. The American partners, I quote, "We were told that Putin invited me to Moscow. I believe that if you want a meeting not to happen, then you should invite me specifically to Moscow," Zelensky said. At the same time, he noted that if Russia has started talking about a meeting, then that's already not a bad thing. But so far, we do not see their desire to end the war, and mature leaders at a meeting of this level should come out with some kind of result, preferably about ending the war, the Ukrainian president added. The President of the United States of America, Donald Trump, stated on Thursday, September 4th, that European leaders must stop buying Russian oil, which, according to him, is helping Moscow finance the war against Ukraine. During a phone conversation with the leaders of the coalition countries, Trump emphasized that over the past year, Russia has received more than €1 billion from fuel sales to the EU. Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron, in turn, confirmed that the Trump administration is very dissatisfied and concerned about the choices of Hungary and Slovakia, which continue to purchase Russian energy resources. "I think this is very good because sometimes they argue that they are very close to the US administration. It's very good that the US administration is saying that this practice must stop," the French president noted. Well, the Prime Minister of Slovakia, Robert Fico, will be in Ukraine today to meet with President Volodymyr Zelensky. The talks will take place in Uzhhorod, and it will be very interesting to hear what rhetoric Putin's friend will use now. These days, the Security Service of Ukraine is literally clearing Crimea of Russian air defense systems and radars. Could the occupied peninsula become the lever that changes the course of the Russian-Ukrainian war? We'll talk about this in a minute. On the eve of winter, Ukraine will receive an additional air defense system from the Nordic countries and the Baltics. This was announced by the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. In Russia itself, there is talk about plans to create military units from gamers, who supposedly can learn to operate drones more quickly. However, in reality, this is simply a hidden mobilization. More details on all of this in our military review.
Strengthening security. On the eve of winter, Ukraine will receive an additional air defense system from the Nordic countries and the Baltics. This was stated by Volodymyr Zelensky. Sweden also does not rule out selling modern Gripen fighter jets to Kyiv. Back in 2023, Sweden allowed Ukrainian pilots to be trained on these multi-role fighter jets.
The Swedish Gripen is not sensitive to runways unlike its American counterpart. Moreover, the Gripen can even take off and land on highways. Moreover, it only requires a runway no longer than 400 meters for takeoff. It's also worth noting the tactical and technical characteristics of the Gripen. It possesses the capability to accurately detect aerial targets at impressive distances of up to 120 kilometers, and it can also effectively identify moving ground targets at a range of up to 70 kilometers.
However, the delivery of these aircraft directly depends on the end of the war in Ukraine, the Swedish minister stated. Meanwhile, Russia never ceases to amaze. Pro-Kremlin media have reported on plans to create so-called gamer troops in the aggressor country. According to propagandists, video game enthusiasts are supposedly able to master drone operation faster than regular recruits.
First and foremost, the aim is to save money here. It's impossible to train a professional UAV operator even in 40 hours, as was previously stipulated by the regulations of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. All the more so when we're talking about training a UAV operator in just 10 hours. And it should be noted that this initiative is, above all, a political one. It is intended to further militarize Russian society and to demonstrate the Russian side's plans to continue active hostilities, not only in Ukraine, but also, accordingly, the threat of possible direct confrontations with the NATO bloc.
But can Putin even continue to wage war at all? The UK Defense Minister has spoken of the critical weakness of the Kremlin dictator. John Healey noted that Russia's need for military assistance from North Korea and China is direct evidence of this.
This is not about requests for help, but about attempts by the Russian Federation to create a new military political bloc to counterbalance NATO, the creation of the so-called axis of evil. At the moment, its clear configuration is visible. It is Moscow, Beijing, Tehran. But the losses of the occupation army are evidence of Putin's weakness. This amounts to up to 1 million personnel and accordingly the virtual destruction of the Russian Federation's Black Sea Fleet. According to British intelligence, the presence of the Russian Federation in the Black Sea region has dropped to a record low in the past 100 years.
But of course, Putin is not ready to admit his defeat. During a press conference following his visit to China, the dictator made a new statement regarding the conditions for ending the war against Ukraine. The Kremlin's master declared that it would be possible to agree on an acceptable option for ending the war if common sense prevails. If not, then everything will have to be resolved by military means.
This is nothing more than a bluff on the part of the Russian dictator. The point is that the Russian dictator is well aware that his so-called territory exchange plan, specifically the withdrawal of Ukraine's defense forces from controlled areas of the Donetsk region in exchange for the temporarily occupied territories of Kharkiv and Sumy regions, will completely fail. Moreover, at this moment, there is no advance of Russian troops deeper into the Dnipropetrovsk region.
And the Kremlin dictator also stated that he is ready to meet with President Zelensky. However, according to Putin, the meeting should take place in Moscow.
There is already a response from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine. In particular, Ukraine's Foreign Minister Sybiha noted that at the moment, 7 countries are ready to provide territory for a high-level meeting. This refers to a meeting between the President of Ukraine and the Russian dictator. And such proposals from the Russian Federation indicate a prolongation of the negotiation process and actual manipulation of public opinion in the West.
Meanwhile, US President Trump announced that in the coming days he intends to have a phone conversation with Zelensky. According to him, only after that will it become clear what decisions Washington will take next.
At the moment, preparatory work is underway. Specifically, measures are being taken to exert economic pressure on the Russian Federation. In particular, a decision has been made to increase tariffs on Indian goods to 50%, which accordingly serves as a clear economic and political signal to the Russian Federation regarding the Trump administration's further plans to block the economic activities of the occupying country.
But so far, the sanctions have had no impact on the decision-making of the Russian dictator. According to Mikhailo Podolyak, advisor to the head of the Office of the President of Ukraine, one possible scenario for ending the war could be freezing hostilities along the front line. However, the final decision will be made by Volodymyr Zelensky.
Ukraine was the first in the world to use swarms of AI-powered drones on the battlefield, while the Russians have learned to control their Shahed drones online and attack moving targets. The drone war is gaining momentum, and we will tell you about the latest innovations in the arsenals of the opposing sides.
Swarms of AI-powered drones have already entered the battlefield. On this new frontier of warfare, Ukraine is using technology that allows groups of drones to communicate and make decisions independently of their operator.
According to Western journalists, Ukraine is using artificial intelligence in military operations so that groups of drones can coordinate their actions to attack well-defended Russian positions. Military experts claim that operations involving large and small groups of drones represent a new stage in the war. Such innovations make it possible to deploy dozens or even thousands of drones simultaneously to overcome any air defense systems and target defenses, whether it's a city or a specific military facility.
If it becomes possible to scale up production and so-called swarm attacks occur, meaning when a swarm is flying, it's clear that you can shoot down part of the swarm, but you can't shoot down 100 drones flying at the same time. In this case, of course, there will be major disruptions to the power grid, significant disruptions to the transportation system, and the destruction of normal life will begin. We've actually seen this year with air transport, and now we're seeing it with railways. This drone war has made Russia weak. It's impossible to deploy air defense systems everywhere. There simply aren't enough of them.
Analysts insist that this innovative technology is a harbinger of the future of warfare. Meanwhile, at the Ukrainian company that developed the unique software, they are lifting the veil of secrecy a bit about what to expect from this new military development. It turns out that a swarm of strike drones, like a living organism, analyzes what is happening in real time and makes decisions based on the situation.
The drones can decide which one will strike first and adapt to the circumstances. For example, if one of them runs out of battery, Ukrainian forces began using this technology about a year ago to lay mines. Since then, it has been used to strike Russian military equipment and infrastructure.
And it must be admitted they are using it extremely effectively. In the Kremlin, just hearing the phrase drone swarm is enough to make their knees shake. Even the enemy admits that they simply have nothing to counter such advanced Ukrainian weaponry.
They are truly impressive.
By the way, if something goes wrong during such an autonomous operation, the system immediately hands over control to a human operator. Fortunately, another cutting-edge Ukrainian technology promises to help with this, the Kolibri 13 FR1. This is the so-called relay drone for FPV, featuring autonomous navigation and resistance to electronic warfare. It's an inexpensive alternative to the Chinese DJI drones that are widely used on the front lines.
At the very beginning of the Russian invasion, Russia was striking Ukrainian territory with missiles and drones almost unopposed. Ukraine simply had nothing, almost nothing to respond with against Russian territory. But now, as they say, here we are. Now, Ukraine has drones that are taking out Russian industry, and Ukraine has acquired long-range missiles. Well, as Putin says, the special military operation is going according to plan. Apparently, this is part of the plan too.
The new domestic UAV is not just a drone, it's an entire system that includes 2 relay carriers, a ground control station, and additional antennas. This approach makes it possible to maintain a stable communication channel at the tactical level. The drone's design is modular, which allows for quick replacement of damaged components right on the battlefield. Among the advantages of the Ukrainian Kolibri are its resistance to strong winds, low temperatures, and the ability to operate both day and night.
When they learn to effectively interact with each other and communicate,
when they learn to guide each other to targets, or let's say cover each other, just like we see at various Chinese shows where drones in the sky perform all sorts of beautiful formations. It will be the same, only in war, and that of course will be truly terrifying. It's completely unclear how one could fight against this if drones are taught to think, so to speak, to make their own decisions. Especially if drones are taught to make decisions to engage targets. That would be an absolute nightmare.
So how does the Kremlin respond to all this? Instead of developing new types of air defense systems, Putin is putting all the efforts of the Russian defense industry into creating more and more methods of terror. In particular, they are actively improving their Shaheds, training them to strike residential buildings of peaceful Ukrainians as accurately as possible. This unpleasant news for us was recently shared by a military radio technology specialist with the call sign Flash. According to him, Russian mopeds have recently become much more dangerous and deadly.
A fresh discovery just now. As you can see, there are antennas installed on the edges of the wings, but unfortunately, unlike the Gerans, it's not possible to find the modem and cameras. They get disassembled and burn up. For those who don't know, this is a new version of the Shahed, which can be controlled online from Russia, can conduct reconnaissance, and even attack moving targets.
However, it must be acknowledged that the Ukrainian defense industry took up the task of improving Ukraine's air defense system long before this. Staying ahead of the enemy, our engineers are already actively developing our own counterpart to HIMARS. The foreign missile system has proven its effectiveness on the battlefield with high accuracy and the ability to operate at long distances. This is exactly what we need. For Ukraine, having its own counterpart to American weaponry means not only reducing dependence on Allied supplies, but also the ability to adapt the system to modern warfare conditions and the specifics of combat operations. While the technical specifications of the Ukrainian system have not yet been disclosed, experts suggest that it involves a wheeled platform with high mobility, capable of launching guided missiles at distances of hundreds of kilometers. So it's high time for the occupiers to start preparing for new surprises from the Ukrainian armed forces.
Russian President Vladimir Putin should not be taken too seriously, said the NATO Secretary General at the Defense Summit of the International Institute for Strategic Studies in Prague. NATO should not overestimate Russia's power since its economy is no bigger than that of Texas, Rutte said. We need to stop making Putin seem powerful. He's the governor of Texas, nothing more. Let's not take him too seriously. Political quotes Rutte as saying. The NATO Secretary General also stated that Russia has no right to forbid the deployment of Western troops in Ukraine. Why should we care what Russia thinks about Ukraine? Ukraine is an independent state. It decides for itself how to ensure its own security. Finland didn't ask Russia's permission to join NATO. We are sovereign countries too. And if Ukraine deems it necessary to invite security forces to support peace, that is its right, Rutte said, commenting on Putin's remarks about the inadmissibility of deploying Western contingents on Ukrainian territory. Putin's loyal ally Patrushev accused Japan of preparing new territorial claims against Russia. The aide to the Russian dictator stated at the Maritime Board that Japan does not intend to stop at the Kuril Islands and is harboring plans to annex other Russian territories. We will tell you what is really happening in our report.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Russia is preparing for yet another war. The dispute over the Kuril Islands is gaining momentum.
It's important to note that here the task at hand is quite complicated.
Moscow has stated that Japan is planning to put forward new territorial claims against Russia. According to Putin's aide Nikolai Patrushev, this poses a direct threat to the national security of the Russian Federation. From his point of view, Tokyo's policy, which seeks the return of the islands, is driven by commercial interests.
Today, the Japanese need injustice regarding the so-called Northern Territories, as well as the mineral and biological resources there. The deep waters near the Kuril Islands possess unique hydrography.
Russia is a vassal of China. China and Japan are strategic adversaries. Therefore, any choice made by Patrushev, Putin, or any member of the Russian ruling elite is essentially a gesture and a nod from Moscow toward its senior partner, Beijing. So it's probably not worth being surprised by this statement. But overall, it should also be understood that Russia is aggressively disposed toward any representative of the Western camp.
Patrushev also emphasized that Russia will not sit idly by in the face of Tokyo's militarization policy and will continue to build up its defensive capabilities in the Far East.
Russia always uses claims that someone allegedly wants to attack it as a pretext for aggression. This has always been the case, without exception. And the most recent wars started by Russia also began according to the same pattern. Russia never attacks first. This is the foundation of their ideology. It always claims to be repelling someone else's attack. Therefore, from the perspective of official Russian statements and their diplomatic communications, accusing someone of allegedly wanting to attack Russia is consistently and invariably the crucial first step toward launching an aggressive action against that very entity or nation.
First and foremost, it is the desire to appear to be something rather than to actually be it. At present, Russia does not have enough resources to wage a full-scale war with Ukraine, prepare for a potential invasion of the Baltic countries, and at the same time build up military resources in the Far East. It's more of a declaration of intent. And again, the message to China is that in the context of confrontation with Chinese adversaries, Russia is ready to be a major ally and a junior partner in any initiative from Beijing.
And once again, the Russian dictator's aide stated that Russia rightfully owns the islands and that there is nothing to discuss here.
Their status is currently considered disputed. As far as I understand, I believe it's their territory. Russia controls these territories, but Japan does not legally recognize this.
The point is that for more than 70 years, the countries have been unable to sign a peace treaty due to the territorial dispute over the Kuril Islands. Tokyo names the return of the islands as the main condition for signing the treaty. But the Kremlin believes that the Southern Kurils became part of the USSR as a result of World War II and that their sovereignty is beyond question.
These include the relevant Kuril Islands, including some islands that Japan refers to as the Northern Territories, which they believe are not directly related to the main Kuril Islands. They were occupied by the Soviet Union, but this was not legally finalized in the form of a specific treaty. And now the prospects for such a treaty look more and more doubtful. That is, during Yeltsin's time, there was a draft of such a treaty that would have regulated all the issues, including, in particular, territorial ones. There was an interesting proposal that Russia would return 2 small islands to Japan. In exchange, Japan would recognize Russia's control over the 2 remaining, somewhat larger islands, and in this way, a kind of diplomatic solution would be found. But at that time, it all fell through.
The Russian dictator and the former Prime Minister of Japan met 25 times to try to reach an agreement on the islands, but without success. And after the constitution was amended, the transfer of any part of Russian territory was made illegal.
In Russia, the law and the constitution are not considered absolutely unbreakable norms. Putin himself was only supposed to be elected for 2 terms according to the constitution, yet he remains in power to this day. And the Russian constitution has been changed so many times already that I think the essence of the problem here is not really about the constitution itself, The real issue lies in Putin's personal desire, so to speak, to demonstrate his imperial grandeur. But Putin is not eternal, and neither is Russian imperialism.
In March 2023, Russia broke off peace treaty negotiations with Japan, which had supported Western sanctions after the invasion of Ukraine.
The United Kingdom imposed sanctions against individuals who forcibly deport, indoctrinate, and militarize Ukrainian children. The list also includes the Akhmat Kadyrov Foundation, which runs so-called re-education programs for Ukrainian children and teenagers, subjecting them to militaristic training. The president of the foundation, Aymani Kadyrova, Kadyrov's mother, was also sanctioned. Please see all the details in the next segment, and don't forget to like this episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel Ukraine Today.
The United Kingdom has expanded its sanctions against Russia. Among others, Putin's pioneer organization was included in the list. The youth movement First and the Akhmat Kadyrov Foundation, headed by the mother of the Chechen leader Aymani.
They say my mother was included in the sanctions. She only helps the poor, the needy, those who are recovering. She helps them, so why is she being sanctioned? Why are they imposing sanctions against her? What kind of people are you, really? Are you even people or just cattle? If you don't lift the sanctions against my mother, do you hear? Take them off and leave, do you hear? I simply won't let this go, do you hear? She never took part in anything. She always stays at home. She doesn't sign a single paper, do you hear? She has never been involved in anything political, do you hear? That's it.
Sanctions, both those imposed from one side and those from the other, are quite a quick and effective way to completely eliminate this element of propaganda influence and serve as a rather effective and powerful tool in the current geopolitical landscape.
Before this, several countries had already imposed sanctions against Kadyrov's mother, since her foundation, which is supposed to help those in need, actually donates billions from charitable contributions to the war. So,
whatever I need, I get from the Akhmat Haji Kadyrov Foundation, which has already spent 42 billion rubles on the special military operation. All I have to do is pick up the phone, call Ramzan Akhmatovich, say I need something, and the next day I already have it.
And then there's all this whining in the West about it, saying, oh, the mother isn't a political figure. The mother doesn't sign anything. The mother is from Kadyrov. The mother doesn't say anything about politics at all. People like that don't need to say anything. She serves a symbolic function, being the mother of Kadyrov, who is essentially Putin's appointee in the region, because this organization, this charitable foundation, serves exclusively Putin's interests, the interests of spreading the so-called Russian world.
Kadyrov himself supposedly takes pride in the sanctions against his family and claims they have no effect whatsoever. He even once threw a party to celebrate his world record for the number of sanctions.
The highest number of sanctions imposed on a person, their relatives, and associates in the world, with a record of 68 sanctions. I present the award to Ramzan Akhmatovich Kadyrov.
Today, I am very proud and happy.
Another sanctioned organization now, the Movement of the First, under the guise of good deeds, is brainwashing stolen Ukrainian children, turning them into potential cannon fodder for Putin's army.
And today I'm announcing measures against those monsters who illegally deported Ukrainian children in an attempt to indoctrinate and militarize them for the Kremlin.
School children and students are forcibly enrolled into the Movement of the First Mom, which is why the number of Putin's pioneers is growing at a cosmic rate.
The Movement of the First was founded quite recently at your initiative, at the initiative of your associates, only in 2022. But since then, it has gained truly massive, grand national scale. More than 11 million people are participating in this movement. Congratulations to you on this.
It is very difficult to resist, for example, when children organize some kind of cultural mass event, say in a country of the Rappel Union, at some pioneer camp, and through horizontal connections, for instance, they exchange with European countries, staying there for a while, living with families. Well, let it not be to Russia again. Obviously, no one is going to go to Russia, but this movement does exist in Europe. In Russian-speaking countries of the Baltics, it is quite active. For example, there are many Russian schools with Russian language instruction in Bulgaria. Romania, too, is still fairly tolerant of this for now. In Moldova, which is not a member of the European Union, it has long been considered a Western country nonetheless.
On the temporarily occupied territories, the scale of propaganda is off the charts. The criminal authorities take pride in drawing as many children as possible into a true Putin'S cult.
We will never part with Russia. No one will be able to stand in our way.
This movement opens up a wide range of opportunities for our youth, from volunteering to scientific research, from Zarnitsa, military patriotic games, to environmental projects. The first movement has brought together under its wing proactive, energetic, goal-oriented, and creative young people. We are Russian people, and for us, it is important not to be alone.
There, entire educational institutions are immediately enrolled en masse into Putin's first movement.
As a matter of historical events, today the Lyceum is joining the ranks of the Russian First Movement. They are already full of ideas, eager to prove themselves, to show what they can do, and to demonstrate that the First Movement is an organization that is needed and important in today's society.
The Kremlin dictator, the real Volkva Vechishkuraya, tells children lies about values that neither he nor his bloody regime have ever followed for a single day.
After all, a person does not acquire something just to wither away because of it. Indeed, the true essence of life and personal growth lies not in mere acquisition, but in the profound act of sharing. You know, the real profound secret to enduring happiness and genuine fulfillment is to generously share what you have with others, to actively help and wholeheartedly support others in their journeys. This is precisely where an individual truly finds their authentic self, discovers their purpose, and this is what ultimately brings the greatest, most profound satisfaction and a deep sense of contentment.
And let Putin's cronies shout at the top of their lungs that the sanctions don't matter, but thanks to this Western policy, the whole world knows that under the guise of charity, the Putin regime is hiding criminal organizations.